Hey everybody, my name is Suke. Welcome to Lead Guitar Workshop. I want to talk a little bit about Danny Gatton. Man, this guy changed things for me when I first saw him, and I'll tell you a little bit about that experience at the end. I want to show you a couple of my favorite moves that Danny does. So the first thing that I noticed Danny would do was this little boogie pattern. And you can kind of like chase the changes with this idea. So what is this thing? If you look at the form, it's just following the chord shape. So if you look at this E form bar chord, I'm on G, and you look at it even in its like kind of small F form. What he's doing is he sees the root on the D string, and he's using a lot of double stops. I think these came a lot from like Hammond organ players and stuff. So he's using his two middle fingers, middle and third finger, to hit the root with the pick, and then those two fingers with the bar. We call this the mini bar or small bar on top. Then he goes to this like kind of C form of a chord when he lays down that third finger. So it's like root, the double stop, root, lay the finger across. That's getting the C and the E notes. There's always double stops on top. Back to the root again. And then these two notes of the G chord, which are the B and the D, the third and the fifth. Now I like to hammer on, which he did as well. It's tricky because you have to bar the B flat and the D, but when you hammer on the B note, don't interrupt the D. Now I add a couple little extra notes at the bottom. So again, you could pick this. So Danny would, I believe, would use this like a device. He could kind of sculpt it and mold it. He had moves and licks, but good players can adjust stuff. Like he might dip. Later, he would add a flat finger. And that works great over like the 4 chord. If you went to C or a C7, and you're pedaling now, this G note ends up being the 5th. But for now, just take this like kind of boogie. Again, you don't have to play it like Danny did. You can take his devices and learn from him and redirect it how you want to take it. That's what I always found with my heroes, that I never played in their style, but I took a lot from their style. So you could practice over blues. 4 on the G, twice on the C, back on the G, D. You can move it up an octave as well. So that really opened the door to a kind of like a rhythm guitar and a lead guitar stuff when I figured out how Danny did that. The other thing Danny did a lot was the banjo roll. I don't know why this was so intriguing. I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. And it was funny, when I went to college, I had a guy showed me this who was a banjo player. I didn't think banjo players went to jazz schools. But this guy from North Carolina showed me this. And it was my first introduction also into the idea of 3-3-2. So what a banjo player does, and this applies to hybrid picking, is everything is often in 8ths or 16ths, especially like in bluegrass and country and stuff, not triplets. So if you kept doing 3 notes at a time, you would end up with 9 or 6 or something, right? So what banjo players would do is they would drop the third one of the third time. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And that causes a great syncopation and a really fun thing. You can go to town. We'll have a whole bunch of lessons about 3-3-2. And my students are all chuckling for how much I talk about that. But here's the banjo thing. We go back to that mini bar. So the root and the 5th. Now you're gonna use your pinky on the G string. Ooh, that sounds out of context, right? The blue note. So it's like a flat 5-5 to root. So the idea is you have to do a good job of like muting, like lifting up the notes so they don't make too much of a wash, but you want it to wash like a banjo does. So what I'm thinking of is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Now the tricky part is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. You could think of them as eighth notes or sixteenths. They're not triplets, right? That's important to understand that. You could do it up high. Danny loves to do it up in the octaves. Right, really cool sound. I love that for some reason. It's just a fun little thing to learn. The other big thing that that I learned from Danny Gatton, number 3, is pedal tones. Pedal tones have some power in them. I was just starting to get into this concept in a jazz side when I heard John Coltrane doing it a lot, like on My Favorite Things and stuff. So this idea had already started to open in my brain, and I loved it musically. What a pedal tone is when you keep going back and forth to the same note. So usually in scales, people might go up and down, right? And I didn't know what else you do. You either go up or you go down, right? But no, you can kind of break it in the middle if you keep a note going back and forth. I'm actually moved back down to G minor here for a second. So what a pedal tone would is if you kept this note, this G note for instance, and let me just look at pentatonic pattern 1. So if I go back and forth from this note, next note of the scale, back to the root, next note of the scale, skip a string, back to the root. So that's a pedal tone. I used to think as a guitar player they would just open strings and stuff, but no, any note works. It's just a concept. Remember, you could take these as, I call them devices. You can really ask anything of these things. So if I keep it going like as a drone, now I can sustain it. If you notice, you want to be able to also switch between them. I remember hearing that on a recording. It's on one of Danny Gatton's tracks off Unfinished Business, that he's pedaling a G. And you hear him shift to this G up here from this G to keep the notes going up higher. It was really, I love when I heard that. I felt like I got let into a little secret when he did that, you know. So with Danny Gatton, really the big thing, besides he could cover so many styles, this isn't about how incredible of a player he was, but these particular couple of techniques really resonated with me. Again, the first one was the boogie. The second one was the banjo roll. And the third one was pedal tones. He used to be so creative with those ideas. Really, those kind of techniques with the hybrid picking changed it for me. When I first saw Danny Gatton, when I was back at school, I went to Berklee College of Music a long time ago, and it was like the early 90s, and I had just gotten there. And one of the best parts about there was being surrounded by musicians who knew and were inspired by a lot of stuff. And I was in Berklee had a lot of clinics, so a lot of people would come in and demonstrate stuff. Like we constantly had Pat Metheny coming and talking to us, which was incredible, man. That information alone was almost worth the tuition. But one day there was a sign up for this guy, Danny Gatton, and I wasn't gonna go. I didn't know anything about it. And my friend was like, "You gotta come see this guy, Danny, do a clinic, man." I was like, "Well, what's he do?" "Oh, he's like a rockabilly." And I was like, "That's not really my thing at all." He's like, "No, you gotta come check out this guy." So we walk in one of the little clinic rooms. There's only a couple of rows of seats in the stage, and he was 4 feet in front of us, right? So he had a little Vibrolux amp, and it was him with his telly, his classic beat-up old telly before he got the signature one, his original one, and his bass player, who we always had with him, and he was playing upright. And Danny started playing, and I never saw someone do what he was doing. I think it was like an F blues or something. He had all these chord shapes, and he was moving, and bass lines, and it sounded like 3 guitar players. I didn't know what it was. Then he got into the Lenny Bro harmonics and stuff, and I was hearing like the entire catalog of guitar happening in front of me from one humble-looking dude. If you ever saw him, he looks like anybody, just average Joe guy. And he was laying down, as my friend who was there was saying, he just mowed every teacher's lawn. It was beyond anything I had seen. So he talked to us a lot about. And it was funny because he was very put-offish about being at Berklee. You know, he's like, I don't talk like you guys. I don't know the terminology like you guys. So please forgive me. I don't know this stuff. I taught myself, so I don't know the lingo and the jazz stuff like that. And everyone's like, no problem, man. Like, dude, just whatever. But then here's an important lesson. I understood the level of I did it by feeling and just on my own versus where that calibration is. Because for instance, he said something like this that floored my brain. He said, well, when you want to play some out sounds and you're playing a G7, you know, he's like, I don't know what you jazz guys call us, but I don't do anything fancy. I just play an A flat melodic minor scale. And I was like, that's not complicated. Playing a G7 and you're going to think of an A flat minor scale. Of course, it's the G altered scale, and it's another way. That's a very complex idea. He dismissed it as something very fundamental and basic because he didn't know the terminology for it. That really changed my perception about what people think they know and don't know, and what the opposite of that. It really was changing on that. But Danny proceeded to play and show us demonstrations of stuff he would do and his technique, and we were asking him questions. Of course, when someone asked him about his tone was incredible, and he was bragging about, glowing about these Joe Barden pickups. Immediately after the clinic, I went upstairs to my room. I had a little bit of money from my birthday. I looked up in the phone book. This is before like internet, right? And I called Joe Barden in Virginia. I got him on the phone in his shop and ordered 2 of his pickups, and they're actually in that Strat behind me because that was the only guitar I owned. So 2 of those are the original Joe Barden pickups that I bought from Joe Barden on the phone because of that Danny Gatton clinic. So I had never seen anything like Danny. When he talked about the hybrid picking, I really didn't understand people could do that. I had done finger picking for some years with my teacher on a nylon string, and it seemed separated, right? I knew some people had thumb picks and did that kind of country thing, but I tried that and I didn't like it. I didn't know I was allowed to hybrid pick, and that was a game changer. That was walking out of that Danny Gatton clinic that day, I never played guitar the same way. I took everything I know that was a finger picking thing, I was trying to transfer every finger picking thing I knew into hybrid picking. One of my favorite parts about it is you can use it for chords. Bass lines, like it changed the game. So Danny Gatton really leveled the playing field on a lot of places and really didn't get the acknowledgement. It was so sad, especially toward how his life ended and stuff, for such a beautiful player. If you ever want to find out some of my favorite recordings from Danny Gatton, are the Redneck Jazz Explosion. I know. There's 2 volumes. They're both fantastic. The first one to me is just some of the best musical playing. It's got a great Buddy Emmons on steel guitar. It's guitar, bass, drums, steel drums, and steel, pedal steel, and it's just phenomenal. The album with Joey DeFrancesco playing straight ahead jazz, absolutely ripping. There's an album called New York Stories, which again was Danny trying to stretch out and played with some other jazz players, a couple horn players and a grand piano and stuff like that. Really incredible stuff. His own albums like Unfinished Business and 88 Elmira Street, those were some of my other favorites. Danny really was an incredible player. I wish, having to see him live and get to meet him. And then later that night, he actually at Berklee, he was there because he was playing the Bill Levitt Memorial Concert. Bill Levitt was the head of the guitar department at Berklee College of Music, and he wrote the books, the method books and stuff. And he was there when I was there, but just passed away within my first year. So they had a memorial concert, and they had Danny come and play. And he absolutely blew the house down. It was just classic Danny. Again, forever I never would have had that happen, that experience, had I not been at school and had my good buddy drag me down there for that. So, all right, have a great time. Keep playing. Explore these ideas. They're really incredible, and really the hybrid picking thing really was a game changer. All right, folks, keep playing.